Prepare to surprise yourself in your own ability to embrace death, grief, and aging through this rich interview with end-of-life doula Traci Arieli. Honor yourself, celebrate your strength, empower your transformation with your Yin-care. This is the Yin-care podcast, and I'm your host, Margaret Jacobson, the Mother Rising. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to your womb wisdom. I'm Margaret Jacobson, the Mother Rising, and this is the Yin-care podcast. You've been watching the first few episodes we've been rolling out, and you probably know that I reference a great challenge that I had in 2023, actually, when we were recording the first few episodes of what I'm terming as season 2 of the Yin-care podcast. And that was that my mom, who was 84 at the time, became horribly sick. As an only child, I was incredibly worried that this had the potential of spiraling very quickly, potentially into death. And at the same time, or right around there, my daughter Carly, who you've heard in the episode 36, which was Conversations with Carly, our new series, she had been watching a Chris Hemsworth series done by National Geographic called Limitless. And in one of the later episodes, he and his wife were exploring aging. And he actually met with a death doula. And I had never heard of a death doula, but the conversations that they had and what she walked him through were fascinating to me. And it seemed just like a no-brainer. If you can have someone like a birth doula, why would you not consider a death doula? So when this happened with my mom, I was at my parents' house in Los Gatos, California, which is the South San Francisco Bay Area. I just was in desperation and looked online and just searched under death doulas. And I found our guest that is going to be with us today, Traci Arieli, whom I've been working with ever since. And I'm thrilled to share her with you. I'm also thrilled to share with you that my mom is actually doing quite well. And so the conversations that I continue to have with Traci are much different now, but important nonetheless. So Traci is an end-of-life doula and grief specialist, and Traci's journey began with a deeply personal loss, the suicide of her cousin. And experiencing her family and community struggle to grieve sparked a desire in her to change the narrative around grief and death. And through Traci's work and her podcast, yes, she has her own podcast, Comforting Closure, Conversations with a Death Doula, Traci helps individuals and communities engage in those difficult conversations, ensuring a better quality of life in their final moments. And when Traci is not supporting others, you'll find her practicing yoga, hiking with her husband, or losing herself in a mystery novel, and I believe cycling, which she loves to do. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Traci Arieli to the Yin-care podcast. Welcome, Traci.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to have you here. It's so fun because we've developed such a good friendship at the same time. So it's extra special.
Thank you. Yep.
So, okay, what I was hoping that I wanted to, we'll get back to how you've helped me personally with my parents, but why don't we start by you just sharing with everybody what it means to you to be an end-of-life doula and why you prefer the term end-of-life doula to death doula.
Yes. Well, as you said, I got into this because there was a death in my family. My cousin, who I was close with, died of suicide. It was a very big surprise. And my family, when you're dealing with a loss by suicide, it is very difficult. All death is difficult, but my family didn't grieve well. And our community, of course, had their challenges with it also. And I saw this and I said, okay, I want to do something about it. And then I got the chance. I turned 50 and decided that I wanted to take the chance. And I used to be in tech, so I went from tech to this. And I have never looked back. When I started this career, everyone was using the term death doula.
Mhm.
End of life doula wasn't as prevalent, and still, I don't think is as prevalent. Um, but I have a belief that when I work with a family and I work with people, it is not about the death. It is about the quality of life in
Mhm.
that last stage of their life, which
Right.
of course ends when they pass away, ends when they die. So I really try to focus on what that quality of life is, what is important to a person and their loved ones, what is
Right.
important in their life right now, because how you live is how you're going to die.
Yeah.
So it is really just looking at those values and looking at what brings happiness right now and trying to ensure that that continues until the very end.
Right. Absolutely. Um, and it makes me, I mean, I was going to ask this question later, but it makes me think, um, do you think like right off the bat, when you're talking about quality of life and you're looking at the end of life, do you think that immediately what people's perception of what happens after death immediately sort of comes into play in the conversations? Or are they able to focus on just the quality of life? Does that come up? Does the after death part ever come up? I am sure it does. Or,
The afterlife portion does come up when I'm companioning, when I'm sitting with a person when they're really terminally ill. I work with people from all different phases. I love to get in early where we could talk about advanced directives and talk about that type of thing, the planning. When I first meet with people, it's usually about the planning and the death itself. I think people are less concerned initially
right,
about the afterlife
right.
than the actual death because there's so much fear around the actual death.
Yeah. And the logistics of it, I mean, which lends me to really the first thing that we did together when I contacted you, my mom was just really ill at home. She hadn't gone to the hospital yet. And we didn't know that she was quietly developing an infection that turned into sepsis that landed her in the hospital for that time. And then a series of things, right? Oh my God. I just hate to even think back to that time because it was such a nightmare for everybody. But anyway, the first thing we did was I called you. We did like a quick conversation on the phone, which you were so great. And I was like, oh, this is going to be, I just felt like this like relief in my system of, because the other piece being an only child, being that I live in Wyoming, like to not feel like there was someone locally that could hold a presence around everything that we were going through, you know? And so when you came over, I'm trying to remember what that first document was that we went through. And of course, I was thinking about this the other day and planning our thing. And I'm like, we never went through that with my dad. And he's the perfect person for us to talk about because he was so uncomfortable with the conversations we were having. So share with everybody what we were going through.
Yeah, so we first went through some of the advanced directive work, but even before that, we went through your mom's values, her life, her and this was before because after that we did a life review and that's totally separate.
Totally
But we
different.
went over her values and what she really enjoyed. And I think that any conversation, even when you're talking about an advanced directive, and for those that don't know what that is, it is the healthcare advanced directive is where you document what you want your healthcare preferences to be. Do you want CPR? Do you want a whole host of other things? Um, but even before you start that conversation, you got to talk about your values, what you really enjoy in life. And so we had that conversation with your mom, and a whole bunch of her stories came up.
That's right.
and really informed what she wanted moving forward. We also did talk about other things such as, you know, and this wasn't really specific to her because you have your father and your father has this knowledge also, but we did talk about what she wanted as far as disposition, any utilities, make sure your father has all those passwords
Right.
and all the account numbers. And that was important and is important even if you have a spouse, because sometimes you only have one spouse taking care of that kind of
Right.
stuff. And so that when that spouse passes on, it's difficult if that's not documented. So we went over a whole bunch of things, and it turned into a really nice conversation. I remember hearing all of your mother's conversations and hearing all of your mother's stories. And I know that even you're like, oh, I didn't know that.
I know.
So
And she
it
was
turned into
great.
something beautiful.
Yeah, she was great at sharing. And yeah, there were some things like you were asking her things like, we were talking about like at the end of her life, we were asking some very pointed questions, like if things get to the end,
Yeah.
if there was what things kind of brought her comfort, and you were suggesting like nature, and she was saying the ocean, and would ocean sounds be nice, and what smells did she like, and she like said bay leaves, and I was like, oh, of course bay leaves are amazing, like things that I wouldn't have thought of. And here's my dad sitting next to her going, do we really have to talk about all this? Is this is like, he was feeling like it was a very morbid conversation and really uncomfortable. And
I
so that's why I'm giggling that we haven't done it with him yet, because he's so much more comfortable now, I think, talking about it and making a couple jokes about it. But it's taken all of this. I feel so blessed that we've had such a good amount of time to allow him to relax into just having the conversations, because we want it to be this beautiful space that we can just hold and for whatever happens.
Yeah. And we also talk to your parents about what they've already seen in way of death. They've had friends who've passed away. They've had family members, their parents that they've seen become ill, and what that experience was like. And from that, we did have that discussion about the environment. So, when you're talking, there's one part of this, the healthcare part of it. Most people don't know, though, that when you go into hospice and which in the United States, it's unfortunate that most people don't take care of hospice or don't take advantage of hospice beforehand. Hospice is covered by Medicare.
Can we just say, like, it can be a very misleading term when we say go into hospice, because
Yes.
that sounds like you're going somewhere, and it doesn't necessarily mean that. It means that you're technically moved under in a medical like referral. You are now technically approved for hospice
Yep.
care. That can be at a facility, but it can be at your house. So go ahead and explain a little bit about that.
So think of hospice not as a place, but as a team of people that are helping make sure your quality of life is as good as possible from a pain management and also from a spiritual and an emotional perspective also, because part of that team is a social worker, part of the team, they do have they do have chaplains, so it is a team of people, and that could be anywhere. And what Medicare covers is that team of people, the medical portion of it. You get oxygen, you get the painkillers, it's a whole host, the palliative care, it's a whole host of things. Medicare doesn't cover the cost of the place. And that's why you can have hospice anywhere in your home. I think something like 80% of people that were surveyed want to be at home when they pass away. It could be in an assisted living community. Many assisted living communities do allow for hospice, and that's something that you do if you're looking to move somewhere. You do need to talk to that assisted living facility to make sure that they do accept people from hospice coming in at the end of your life, so you don't have to move. out. So it is, as I said, think of it as a team of people, and you can take advantage of that
Mhm.
when the doctors believe that you have 6 months or less to live. So that is really the defining factor of when you could really take advantage of that.
Right. And so you mentioned palliative care, and that is another piece that potentially people can take advantage of too, which allows for care to be given continuous, not when I say continuously, it doesn't mean like someone's there all the time, but you have more access to care that can come into the home. So can you explain the difference between the requirements that you would meet for palliative care then that's different from hospice? Do you know?
Hospice is a type of palliative care. I mean, they give palliative care in hospice, and that is that care that it really is making you comfortable. If you're in the hospital and you're receiving palliative care, there is still life-sustaining measures that they are providing. Where if you're in hospice, you're no longer receiving life-sustaining measures. So, as an example, if you're on dialysis right now, um, you most likely will be taken off dialysis unless that's not what you're dying from and it's a comfort measure. So, but usually people are taken off of dialysis because they are not receiving any life sustaining measures. So, hospice, that's going
Right.
away, all those measures. Um, with hospice also, I'd like to say that it isn't 24 hours a day that you're receiving care. The hospice team does come in and educate you. So you will help with giving the pain medication. They're always on call. So if you could phone the hospice if you have a question, but they aren't going to be there at the beginning of hospice when a person is not actively dying. They usually come in a couple days, 1 to a couple days a week, spend
Right.
about 45 minutes, an hour at a time with you. And then when you become closer to death, they might be there every other day. Maybe you are lucky enough to have someone come in every day for about an hour, but they have so many people to visit that unfortunately they can't stay even though they would like to. And that's why people utilize end of life doulas or death doulas, because we can be there 8 hours, 9 hours, and really work with the family and educate too. Death is scary. We're not around it. I'm sure if it was 200 years ago and we saw death every day, we lived on the farm and we saw mom, grandma, and grandpa pass away, then it wouldn't be as scary. But it's scary if you don't know what to expect.
Well, exactly. And that's why it's such an important conversation, I feel like, for me on this podcast with the audience, with all of you guys out there listening, because the Yin-care podcast is really about people taking baby steps to improving their health in what I call health creation. And so for me, it's always been this, I've never been afraid of death. It's never been something that was, to me, like spiritually, it's a transition time. And so because of that view, it doesn't seem, and because of my yoga practice and my spiritual practice, like to me, I've had a physical, biological sense of what it would feel like cellularly to leave the body. And so that doesn't scare me. However, I do believe that we have cut ourselves short in our system, our medical system, of shortening not blaming anybody for this in particular, because I don't believe it's just a healthcare system, but that the lives of people are shortened to a huge degree, that there is a huge potentiality for us to live much longer lives. And so knowing that, that's where I come with, let's get well, everybody. Let's start to, make these daily choices, with the end product being that you get to a place where leaving the body is easier. We're not stuck in a medical system. And so part of the big reasons for me why it's been so important to work with you is that I don't want my parents in the medical system when they're leaving. I want this to be at home. And meeting Tracy sort of facilitated me going down this deep dive of watching. I watched like a monk die online. I'd listened to all these people talking about death and what, the death rattle and what it's like, and just like immersing myself in what the actual nitty gritty, messy parts of death might be, so that it wasn't going to freak me out. And so anyway, just having Tracy there to facilitate, making sure that we have all of the things in place to stay out of the medical system has just been hugely important.
I also think that looking at death and really understanding what it does makes you appreciate your life more and helps you be much more present. I know that with this job, I came from tech, as I said, but coming from tech to here, my view on life has changed so much, so drastically. And the things that are important to me have changed. And I'm frankly much happier. The things I value are
Right.
different.
Yeah, I loved, I was going back and listening to some of your podcasts. And one of them I didn't realize was there. You did a meditation on being with death. And I thought that was so great. Your insights that you got from it were really powerful that you shared. Do you remember what you said? Do you want to share?
Yeah, that was one of the first ones where I did a death meditation, and I saw myself. I was lying down, and then I saw myself from above, and I saw my body. But I remember very vividly how hard I was on my body, especially being a woman in our society, and how much I disliked my body, and I would poke at my stomach and stuff. And I remember thinking, wow, I was so tough on my body. I was so mean to my body, and I really didn't thank it. And it really pivoted my thought process. And so after that, the appreciation for myself and what I have has been much greater because of it. It was like a switch.
It's huge. That's huge. That's like, so I'll try and link that that meditation so people can go back and kind of walk through the steps of what that was like and maybe follow through, because that I thought was just so smart. And that's kind of what they did in this thing that I had watched with Chris Hemsworth. The Death Doula took him on kind of a death meditation, what it was like. I can't remember exactly what she said. It was really a beautiful episode, by the way, as a side note.
I'll have to watch it. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, totally. But if you could share, because some of the logistics, like you were mentioning, like CPR and a do not resuscitate, and I forget what a pulse stands for, but of course the advanced healthcare directive. Can you go into some of that and why those things are important for us to discuss and know about ahead of time and plan for?
Yeah. I think, when we're talking about, there are all different parts of planning for your end of life. Mm-hmm. And one of them is the healthcare directive is what you're talking about. And that has all that information of, do you want CPR? Do you want other life-sustaining measures? The most important part of that is finding the right person who is going to be your healthcare proxy. And you should have two people, not one. You should name two people. And I think that most healthcare directives the advanced directives leave space for three. And I'm going into some of the nitty gritty here. People do always ask me, where can I find an advanced directive to fill out? I love the ARP, their website, because they do have a link, and it links to all of the states' advanced directives, and it's just really convenient, and they do a great job. So the most important part to me is having the healthcare proxies that understand your values. And that means having discussions with them. And the reason why it's so important is because it's great that you have a piece of paper. It's 3 pages that says what you want, but there are so many situations that aren't called out. And then you add into that, you're going to family members that might have their own beliefs and might sway the medical team. So it's really important to have this discussion with your advanced care proxies. You need to think about your values. I always start off with, as I've said before, a person values what they want and start off with that discussion and then have that inform what is in those healthcare advanced directives. And as an example, a couple weeks ago, I had a 2-parter on my podcast where a friend of ours who is also a death doula, she interviewed me on my advanced directive. And Oren was sitting right next to me.
I listened to it. It was so great. It was amazing. They were both perfect.
Yeah. And so, and you could see the real nitty gritty stuff that we're talking about, but some of the things that were important to me, I'm really active. So for me to say, I'm going to spend the rest of my life in a bed is not going to work for me. Right. It's just not going to work for me. At one point, we also talked about things that I wanted. I was like, listen, Oren, you make sure I'm bathed every day and you make sure that I'm clean shaven.
I know. I love that.
It was so funny.
You're like, I can't believe I'm saying this on. Like, but you've
at one point I said, you're going to edit this up.
That's one of your things because I've heard you say it more than once.
Yeah, that is one of my things. So, anyways, so having those really funny conversations, but when you look at the healthcare, and that takes, and as I said, informs you. But there are other things like everyone. When we talk about CPR, we have been conditioned to believe it is like what we see on TV or the movies, right? The person gets CPR, they stop breathing, they get CPR, and then they wake up and they're fine. But the reality is, even with younger people, that the majority of people that get CPR, and when I mean majority, I mean in the 90 percentile and above, right, their sternums are going to break. They're not just pressing down lightly. It is, 1 to 3 inches that the people who are doing CPR have to really work at it. Yeah. And as a person in their 50s, personally, I would get CPR. I'm still in my 50s. But when you start looking at people who are in their 70s, 80s, 90s, the likelihood that even if you survive CPR, you're going to walk out of the hospital is minimal. It is only between 7 and something like 17%, depending on which study. But these numbers have been consistent in the studies that they've done since the 1970s through today when they do studies. It is, and that's because, the person's a little bit older, but there could be brain damage from lack of oxygen. There could be a whole number of factors.
You were saying too, you might end up on a ventilator.
Yes, you would. People, when you're older and your sternum is broken, right after they put you on a ventilator. So that will happen. And it was really interesting. On my podcast, I've talked about my father, who was like your father, does not like talking about death. He is really amazing, but he honestly believed that he would not die, that technology would be at the point that it would extend his life. And he actually believed this from I remember when we were a kid, we talked about it, so this isn't something he always believed, that technology would be at the point where he wouldn't pass away. Oh my God. Or his life would be extended. Yeah. And he's also very claustrophobic, and he had a major stroke, or not major stroke. He had a stroke. He's fine now. And we were in the emergency room, and one of the doctors came in and said, I need to ask you, do you want CPR? And my father's, yeah, I want CPR. You keep doing it again and again. You just wake me up. You keep me alive. And I said, well, Dad, wait a minute. You're claustrophobic here. I turned to the doctor. I said, doctor, what's the likelihood that you're going to break a sternum and have to put him on a ventilator? Now, my father was in a large room and could not even deal with being in a large room in the hospital. So you can only imagine how he would be on a ventilator, right?
Oh my
I mean, he'd be
goodness.
out, but if he woke up.
Right.
And so the doctor said, yeah, that's going to happen. So these
It's really
conversations.
hard to get off. It's really, I mean, I know just because my daughter, Carly, had, when she was 22 months old, had a pneumonia that took her into the hospital, and it was awful. I mean, it was just like, it was terrible. But anyway, she was on a ventilator for a while, and her dad I left for a little bit, and he convinced the staff to take her off of it because it was bothering him, but she wasn't ready. She was in so much pain because they had to do this surgery to go in and scrape all this gunk off of her. I can't remember if it was on the lungs or in the interstitial parts of the lungs somewhere. And so she was incredibly sore, and stuff. So she couldn't, it was helping. It was there for a reason. But anyway, it does take time to get yourself on and off of those things, and getting it in and out. I mean, it's not a nice process. It's brutal.
And then you also have to think about some of the other questions are food, are those other life-sustaining measures such as feeding tubes and hydration. And where I see that really mattering is when you are actively dying, or in your stage where your body's shutting down, it doesn't want the food. It doesn't want and we're not talking about, you get into a car accident and it's going to be temporary. What I'm talking about now is you're getting older, your body, you might have kidney disease, you might have something else that is destabilizing your body, but your body's shutting down and you are dying, but your body's shutting down. I see this a lot with people who have dementia,
right,
and who don't want to eat, and they put them on a feeding tube. And especially with dementia, the death journey, that end stage really is when you stop eating and drinking. The body doesn't want it anymore. And that's your body's way of saying, I'm no longer functioning. My brain's not functioning, or, my body, my organs aren't functioning anymore. So when you do something like you are providing nutrition, doing having the tubes implanted and being fed via tube or hydration, that has nowhere to go.
right.
That life sustaining, that has no place to go. So your body, it actually causes issues. You start to swell up. I know with the hydration, sometimes it goes into the lungs, and then you can't breathe. So it's really, our bodies are really smart. They know how to die. And so we just have to be willing to listen to them.
Yeah.
Another thing that you have to think about, and I always ask, is what happens if you can no longer, your brain's not working anymore? What happens if you get into an accident, or you can't breathe for a number of minutes and you have brain damage? What does life look for you then? Do you want that? And so that's another conversation that you need to have. And then lastly, of course, you can even talk about some of the values around medical aid in dying, which is legal in, I think, 11 states now. Don't quote me on that.
I was listening to that interview you did too. And that I have real mixed feelings about personally. Like, I mean, I, on the one hand, feel like I totally understand how that can be helpful, especially if you're terminal and suffering. It's not that I don't understand that. The problem that I have with it is that there should be no there should be no medical incentive. So I just I don't feel totally comfortable understanding what a doctor or what the health plan or who is getting the funding for the actual pharmaceuticals that are being used, and is there any reason why a doctor would be incentivized to do that? Like, I have to feel confident that that has been severed, that piece of it. But I totally understand the compassionate place that it's coming from.
Well, with medical aid in dying, there needs to be two doctors that you get two different doctors that are interviewed with. It's not covered by insurance and it is rather pricey. I think it's about $4,000 out of pocket. So it is, and some people do have deep issues with it, but that's not, then great. Then medical aid in dying isn't for you. But I think that everyone should have that autonomy. I know that I have had surgeries before where I've been in pain for weeks and the doctor could not figure it out. And I remember one time I was in such bad pain that I thought, wow, if this is the rest of my life, if this is how it's going to be, then I do not want to live. I'm in so much pain. And that really went through my head. So I think that people have to realize that it's not suicide. The person is dying. They don't want to die. They're just choosing when and how they are going to die. And it's not in all cases too. I know in the United States, people who have dementia, they can't partake in this. Because you have to be able to self-administer, you have to be able to be interviewed and be very cognizant. It has to be your choice. And so that is another one of the interviews that they do away from the family, just to make sure that that person's not being pressured at all. But it's a hot button for many people.
Yeah, it's interesting. In my perfect, I think I've shared this with you before, my perfect death, not actual death, but post, I know that I think we talked about rituals or ceremonies and also what happens after your death, what's going to happen with your body. These are all questions that you help people work through. In fact, we invited you over for a social call, as I recall, for cupcakes out on the deck at my parents' house, and it turned into a cremation discussion. But my perfect scenario is at the final scenes of the movie Captain Fantastic. And it's where the mom, the whole movie is this sort of progression of honoring the mom's final wishes of what she wanted. She had died and had a mental health issue. And I believe she had committed suicide in the hospital that she was in. And then the message went back, of course, to the family, and the husband knew what she had wanted. They had been living out in the woods in Washington State, I believe. And her parents were in New Mexico. And I think that she had been in New Mexico when in this hospital. And so they were on, this whole mission to rescue mommy was sort of the thing. And in the end, they finally have this beautiful scene of they're singing Sweet Child of Mine acoustically, and they're all around her, and she's, dressed in linens and there's flowers on her, and they're on the coast of Washington, and they just burn her body. And I'm like, that's what I want. An outdoor, I know that that's a little bit far-fetched, but that's what I'm going for.
I think you can only do that in Colorado now. I don't think you could do that pyre, that burning. But I know that many crematoriums will take, and you are able to have a little service there. And so I think that
I called the one that you recommended, and they were really amazing. So these are things that people should keep in mind. When if you're, and I would love to hear you share other eco-friendly ways of burial, et cetera. But this is something that we're looking at for my parents in particular, because I can take their ashes back to Wyoming more easily than I'd be able to bury their body here. And there's just we don't have family that will really be left in California to continually go to a space to honor them. So cremating was something that we really wanted to walk through, but they did say, because it's really important to me, like, I'm so, Tracy knows me, I'm like, don't do anything behind my back. I want to see, how can we see the body? Can we make sure that it's the right body that you're burning? And, like, can we put flowers on them? Can we put a blanket on them? Oh yeah, you can do whatever you want. Everything can be there. You can have a little ceremony beforehand, costs a little more. It's not that much more, but these are all options, right?
Yeah. And I think that before I actually, before I actually, I want to make sure. Yeah. Before I actually became an end of life doula, I didn't know all of these different offerings. There are so many ways that you can dispose of a body. And I hate to say dispose of a body, but let me say, take care of your loved ones after they pass away.
For sure.
There's cremation. I grew up knowing about cremation and burial and even green burial, but there's aquamation. There is, which is better for the environment than cremation. There is something called terramation, which is body composting, which is really neat because they put you in this like cylinder where they're going to turn you, but you can take and visit your loved ones. And it takes a couple, it takes, I think 40 days. And it's really beautiful. So there are so many options. And then after you're cremated, you can be buried. There are certain forests that actually companies buy up forests so that they can save them from being built on or being bought by someone who's going to take and do something with it. But they do it to save the forest. And then you could take in some places you can be buried. Some places they will take the cremains and you could bury the cremains. And it's really wonderful.
Sorry.
Are you there?
Yeah. Sorry. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
Yeah. And then there's reef burials where you can be part of a reef. And it's really cool because like 2 weeks after they put some of your cremains, or they put your cremains into the fake reef. It's concrete, but like 2 weeks after, there's already fish and wildlife that have made their home. So it is really, really cool. And then space memorials being shot off into space. Like there are so many ways you can take and memorialize and honor your loved ones that are special to them, would have been special to them also.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so good to just look at all of the options, I think, and feel into what mentally, emotionally, spiritually feels right to you. And I think the conversation also, though, has to be had with the loved ones that are behind, because oftentimes there's an element in the conversation about, well, are you going to come visit me? Or how will I be honored after I'm gone? And I just think it's so hugely important to me spiritually, our ancestors, our disconnect from honoring just wisdom of our ancestors, whether or not they're physically here or not, on the spiritual plane. That conversation and continuing that conversation is important, whether or not you can be close to where you're burying them or have something, or if there's something on your altar that is in honor to them, because it may not be possible. But having that continued conversation and letting your loved ones know, if that's important to them, that, that you want to honor that. And I just feel like they deserve that too.
Yeah, and I think there are two parts of that. Yeah, the part that you're talking about is the ritual, and is also part of building a different relationship with that person after they are physically not here. And that's really important. It's part of grieving also, which we do not talk about in our society, even though we're all, if you love someone, that's the price you're going to pay. If you love someone, that is, you're going to mourn and you're going to grieve. And it's not going, you don't have only a year to grieve. That's such one of the misconceptions, is after a year, you're okay. And you will always grieve grieve that loss. And you will always hopefully have a relationship with that person, even when they're not physically here. It's just different. I have a relationship with my cousin still. Her name's Heather. And I will always have a relationship with her.
Yeah.
So there's that. But there's the other part of that is the wisdom that the person has and is leaving you. And you did a great job. You and your parents did a great job with doing the video, the life review video, which was so much fun to do. And it was
Yeah,
so
so let's
wonderful.
talk about that. That's in what you would term as a legacy choice, or what do you
A
generally call
life review or legacy,
it?
video. And I loved how we did it because we had your mom talk about her life up until when she met her father, your father talk about his life until he met your mother, and then we got them together and they talked about their lives from that point on. And that knowledge, I think that so many people do not want to talk about their lives. Like my parents don't want to do it because I think it's almost generational. And I talked to my parents. I said, listen, this is really important because when you pass away, all that knowledge we will have lost. We will have lost a part of ourselves.
Exactly.
And so that, for people who are watching or listening, who are older, who are like, oh, I really, I'm not anything special. There is such a loss. If three of my grandparents, we have no video of them. We don't know much about their lives. And it is a loss. Now, I have a grandmother who, when Oren and I got married, we did a video interview of her, of their love story, her and my grandfather.
Mhm.
And we watch it, we laugh, and that would have been lost.
Yeah, exactly. No, it was so great. And so Tracy's husband, Oren, also happens to be a videographer who does this work as well, among many other things that he does with his business. But it was so great because both of them came over to the house, and my dad's like, what are we going to do? And how are we going to know what to do? And Tracy was amazing because she looked up so many great questions to ask. And like my mom was fantastic because she suddenly remembered everything, like everything. And so she was going off on all these little tangents. We had to reel her back in, but boy, Oren distilled it down perfectly. We still have a couple little things that we still are trying to get back to, but to add certain pictures into the final video. But it's just fantastic. It really is. It's so special.
It is, and don't you feel that is, like, aren't you almost relieved? That's because you're not going to be like your children, your eventual grandchildren will have this information about because this is part of who they are.
Yeah. Yeah. And there were some choice, hilarious stories that were shared. So,
Your parents are great. I really love your parents. They're amazing people.
well, we are so grateful to have you. I'll tell you that much. But I do want to get back to the grief part, because that is another big piece of what you offer. So what kinds of things, first of all, do you offer around grief, or what types of support do you feel like are needed for people that are missing?
Yeah. I almost wish, quite honestly, that I didn't have to do grief work. I wish our society was so healthy
Mhm.
that people were comfortable with supporting people who are grieving.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully one day I won't be needed for that. But we live in a society where we're really uncomfortable with talking about dying and grieving, because we almost feel like if I'm around it, it's going to happen to me. Guess what? It's going to happen to you no matter what. So just being present. I'm not a therapist. I'm not there to lead a person who's grieving. People who are grieving know where they want to be and where they need to go, or maybe they don't, and that's fine. I walk alongside the person. I am present. So I do a lot of listening, a lot of talking. Every single person that I've done grief work with, every single one, and it's about 80% of my business, has asked, am I doing, is this normal? Like, people don't feel like they're normal. What's wrong with me? I get a lot. What's wrong with me? Why do I feel this way? After 6 months, they're still grieving. Why am I still grieving? I should be over it. No, it's not something to get over. Your life has shifted.
Yeah.
And so just to be present and to be with that experience, to support the person, is really important. And for people who aren't grief coaches, who aren't grief specialists, and don't know how can I help the person, showing up for the person, showing up for your friend or your family member. You don't need to know what to say. You're just there to listen.
Right.
Even if you're, oh, I'm sorry, I don't, I'm sorry. Just saying, I could feel what you're feeling. I'm really sorry that you're going through that. That's all you have to say. So be present. So I'm very present. I also do a lot of practical work. And what that looks like is when I'm over at a person's home, because I will do grief work not only over Zoom or over the phone, but I will go, if a person lives close enough, I will go to their home and spend a few hours with them. So it's not just 1 hour I'm there and back. As I said, I'm not a therapist. I will spend 3-4 hours with a person. I can help them clean out their loved one's closet. There is a fog that happens, a mental fog. Some people call it widow brain, when a person loses a spouse, where all of a sudden they're finding it really difficult to pay bills, to focus on paying bills. So I might go over and open up the mail with the person and make sure that the bills are being paid with them, make sure that they have food in the home.
Right.
So it is a whole host of not only the grief work, but the practical work. How are we going to make sure that you are still living, even though you're grieving?
Right. That's so powerful and so important. And one of the things that's bringing me back to is that you were really offering that support to my dad when my mom was in the hospital. So Tracy, you took him on a walk one time. You would just call and check in, and just, you were just so, he knew he didn't have to perform for you, and he was a little overwhelmed by all of the people that were, all of the appointments and all of the caregivers and keeping track of her medication in the hospital and all of this. And so it was just nice to have someone that was just like, he didn't have to, you already knew what was going on.
Yeah. And as I said, seeing your loved one die, not only is it the most painful thing that you'll go through, but it is also the scariest thing that you'll go through. And you should, having someone to talk to, that you don't have to try to be okay. It's okay that you're not okay.
Yeah.
Is really important. And your father was great because he just talked about what he was feeling. And yeah, I remember one point he was like, he said something like, I'm really sorry for laying this all on you. And I was like, no, this should be normal. We should be able to talk about this stuff and not feel guilty about talking about this stuff. Um,
Exactly.
and people don't realize that you're going to grieve before the person passes away, when they're sick, because you're grieving what you're losing, what you are going to lose.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, I think also when you're a caregiver like that too, especially when you're the one that you're feeling that everything, you're the like linchpin that's holding it all together. You're feeling like it can't happen on my watch. Like I need to be so vigilant that I've done everything that I can. And that's an incredible amount of stress to carry when
Yep.
you're caring for somebody.
Yeah. And I remember having this conversation with your father because he was really hesitant to get extra help and to help get a caretaker to
Right.
come in. I mean, your mom could not get up. I mean,
Right.
she needed help going to the bathroom, to be
Right.
bathed. She needed, and I remember
And she
specifically.
ended up with an ostomy bag in the end. That was not like what she went in for,
Yep.
but they discovered a blockage when she had been transferred out of the hospital and had recovered from her sepsis and was in a skilled nursing facility. And and then she had to be sent back to the hospital for this surgery. And then she came back again to the skilled nursing facility. So it was like from December 18th or something, all the way till the end of January that she was there.
Yeah.
But you're right. She had all these things she needed, right?
And your father he wanted to do it all because he felt that was his responsibility. He loves your mom so much. And I remember when we're walking, I turned to him, I said, listen, you can either be a caretaker or you could be a husband.
Right.
You cannot be both.
Mhm.
And your wife needs a husband more than a caretaker. You have the funds, hire a caretaker, or I know that Medicare also helps with that. So, and that I think is a huge thing for everyone to realize. And if you're listening to this, remember when your loved one is dying, you could either be the caretaker or you could be the husband, the wife, the daughter,
Mhm.
the friend. You cannot be both.
I know. And we were so fortunate that right before all of this happened, my mom was at that time having trouble and needed help in the house. And so a neighbor of ours had mentioned that the best caretakers were the Tongans. The Tongan women were the best, and that we should find someone from Tonga, that this was going to be the best thing. So my mom, I don't know what she searched up, like it was like care.com, and somehow she found one woman that was actually Fijian, but she happened to have a Tongan housemate that had the schedule that would fit. So we've been graced with Tasha and then her cousin Noah, that is Fijian. She's Fijian Tongan, that are living with my parents now and taking care. And they do. I mean, that's like such a beautiful part of their community that I think we would be so wise to embrace in our own community, which is this acceptance of death and caring for our elders, our loved ones as they're aging. But they have no problem with that. And like you said, I mean, I feel like our family was in a slightly tough position. One is my dad, this was too much for him, but I'm out of state and I'm an only child. I have 3 young adult kids. I'm just barely coming out of the woods from all that. So it's like not great as far as I can't just stop everything. I'm also a wife, myself. So, and support my husband, who's got a very, very challenging medical practice in Chinese medicine, as you know. But in any case, we were so fortunate that they were lined up and they started to come in. My dad started to allow them to come in and help and stay there at the nighttime at the hospitals or the skilled nursing facilities. And then gradually, obviously, another piece that you were there for was when my mom was in the skilled nursing facility, and I was like, her weight had dropped incredibly. They were not attending to her well. I was pissed. I was pissed off about it. And I could see that she was rapidly turning into what I refer to as a billable item,
Yep.
and that it was just like, what medication can we give her? And there were things they were giving her without our approval. That she has a chronic chronic disease called leukocytoclastic vasculitis. And so there are certain medications that are sort of on a list that are, we really try to stay away from them because they can make it worse. And so anyway, Tracy really helped. Tracy would get on the phone with me and we would have these conversations, and I would tell her what was going on. And you were just so helpful to direct me. You need to talk to this person. You need to talk to this person. You need to call a meeting for these people and have that group conversation. And even things like, you helped me make sure that the house was in good order so that they had no excuse. They couldn't keep her there anymore. They had to, it would be medical kidnapping if they did, but we basically gave them the ultimatum and was like, but you helped me kind of point me in the direction for a hospital bed for us to keep at the house and rent. And remember the nursing network that you put me in touch with as well. Yeah.
Thank you. I think that, and I hate saying this because I hate negative talk with any part of our hospital community because they do such good work. But I have told my husband even, do not put me in a skilled nursing facility. Do not leave me there. And it's because they have such staffing problems right now because of, what happened with COVID. A lot of people quit. They don't have the time. And so every single time I've seen clients in skilled nursing facilities, they live there without dignity. They are put in diapers because they're seen as, risk, they don't want to risk the person falling and a whole other host of things. And it's just I would not want to be in a skilled nursing facility for very long. I would insist on being at home and having, occupational therapists or physical therapists come in and have some people come in to help take care of me. Of course, I say that from the view of good fortune of able to, I have long-term health insurance or long-term care insurance. So I've been very lucky that I can do that. I know not everyone can do that, but as much as you can, as quickly as you can, get out of those places for your health.
Yeah. One of the big things that I encourage people within the Yin-care podcast is, as the medical system that we have known is falling in on itself in many ways, it's important to create a life and a health creation lifestyle that we are not dependent on it. And so learning to, whatever your inspiration is, basically from any of the podcasts or anything that we offer at Yin-care or anything outside of Yin-care, whatever your next best love and joy and health improvement for yourself is, go for it. Any baby step in that direction that starts to empower you is going to bring you into greater health. Like, you look 3 months down the road, 6 months down the road, I don't know, you're changing one thing about your diet, one thing about your lifestyle, you're getting more sleep, whatever, you're dealing with your family issue around their death, like whatever it is that you have to do, it's important to keep yourself out of that medical system. And like you said, there's good people that are now part of what's sadly a bad system. It just is a bad system. I mean, I know that everybody says we like to give these caveats. Well, there's certain pieces that are so good. Well, of course there are gems. There are gems that we can salvage from within it, but the whole system itself is just, there's just a lot of things that have to, I don't know how it can be fixed per se. And so the most important thing we can do is to take care of ourselves and keep ourselves out of it, right?
Yeah. And when you are in it, realize that it is a system. Even hospice. Hospice is most hospice. I think there's only like 17% of hospices that are nonprofit in the US, but so most of them are for profit. And with that, and then they have Medicare rules, and they have to see a certain number of people. So that's why a lot of the nurses, there are a lot of hospice nurses who are becoming death doulas now because they want to be able to spend time with those that they help. And death doulas are non-medical. So even if there is a hospice nurse, they are not doing the nurses' jobs for many, many reasons why. And we won't, because of time, we won't go into that. But recognize that people are there, if it's not nonprofit, to make money. And so plan around that. And it is not the fault of the hospice nurse or the chaplain or the social worker, because every single time I talk to people, they want to spend more time with their clients, with the patients. It is our system that is the issue.
Right. Exactly. Oh, that was so well. I love that we brought that into the conversation there. That was one piece that was really important to me. So I'm glad that got expressed. I just have a few, I know we've been going for a while, but I have a few more questions for you if that's okay.
Please.
I wanted to, let's see. Well, yeah, okay, just to piggyback on that, one thing that I did write down was just wanted to remind people that you're not beholden to the medical system as far as your choices. And that's one of the things that Tracy really helped me create was, okay, we can rent a hospital bed at the house. And there were certain ways that we could get, I think, it paid for possibly, but there were at a certain point, it was like, in order to get that in the time that we needed it and what we were going to save by having it covered just didn't make sense. So we just rented it. And there are nurses that you can pay out of your pocket to come to your house, like actual licensed nurses that are part of a network that will come and they can check on you. And so you don't, even though there may be certain things that are covered, the other thing we've looked at is physical therapy for my mom, having someone come to the house that because they go in and out of covering things. So when it's not covered, you can seek out other options, wouldn't you say?
Yes, you can. And again, I say this from a point of, I know I'm lucky. But most people won't be able to afford that, can't. And so what do? And my advice is go online, do the research, and insist. You have to be your own best advocate. And yes, you have to be pushy. You have to be pushy. And I'd even put it a step further. And if you're in the same situation where you want home care, you want you want people to be at home, the doctors, the nurses, they aren't your enemies. Make them part of your team. They want to see your mother, your father, your person healthy also. And so have those discussions and push. You have to be what people would consider pushy, because with your own healthcare, no one is going to be your own best advocate.
Well, yeah. And sometimes like my mom will present as like, you wouldn't guess by the way she's talking to everybody that there are as many challenges going on. And with all of the online like communications between the doctors, it's like the doctors have one picture of what's going on. And we're like, let me explain here.
Your mom is so funny 'cause she's like, and I think most people do that. I know that when I go to the doctors, everything is roses, everything is wonderful.
Yeah.
And I don't know why we do that, but we got to get over ourselves. That's why the doctors are there.
Well, I don't think
Um,
she's trying to hide anything. I just think she doesn't always realize how challenged the situation is for everybody else that's like helping make it easy for her, you know?
yeah.
And I love my mom and I'm just so grateful that she was able to get well and all of that kind of stuff. But and that she's still got some life in her for thank goodness.
She's a
But
lot of life in her.
exactly. There is lots of life in there. Okay, so how do you support individuals with differing beliefs and no spiritual background? And you're the
I
perfect person for perfect person for this because I think Oren has different beliefs, right? Because you share
Yes,
that.
yes. Oren is, and I would say an agnostic atheist.
Mhm,
Um, I am a very spiritual person. Both of us are Jewish. We identify as culturally Jewish,
mhm,
um, and we actually met in synagogue.
mhm,
Um, but my belief is much more spiritual.
mhm.
It isn't. I wouldn't consider religious. I'm a religious Jew anymore, but I am very spiritual. I meditate every morning. I have discussions with, and I'm going to sound very woo woo,
No, this is the
with
place to do it, so don't
yeah,
worry.
with the universe. I believe in having those discussions. When I meditate, I really listen.
Sorry, I missed that. You have discussions with who? With what? Who or
With the
what?
universe, with my spirit, also, what's in, but when I'm meditating, I'm listening. I'm listening for whatever comes.
Mhm.
So we're very different. Um, and that's okay. I mean, I'm fine with that. What works for me is not going to work for everyone. And that's when I work with people and they are very religious or that's the comfort. That's what they have to comfort them. That is their belief. And they should have that. I think that is a gift
Mhm.
for that person. And I don't care if you are a Catholic, a Jew, a Muslim, a Satanist. I do not, that if you take comfort in it, that is what you should have. That is, and it's something beautiful. It's a gift, as I said.
We're all here. We're all part of that universal continuum to move the universe in its grand evolution forward. So it's part all welcomed, all celebrated, even though it can make challenges for us at different times,
Yeah.
especially when you're providing support for somebody at the end of their life. And that's their way out. They need to feel that I just love your business name, Comforting Closure.
Yeah. Thank you. There's an interesting story about that name, but I think that I've been fortunate to I grew up in the Chicagoland area, and then moving to California in the Bay Area. We have a lot of diversity. So I've been lucky to be exposed to a lot and to, yeah, I've been lucky to be exposed to a lot. And when I look at a person, I don't judge them by their ethnicity or their religion. It's really their soul that I
Yeah.
look at, right?
Yeah. That's so cool.
Yeah. And comfort and closure. I love that you love that name. I went back and forth because closure is a really bad word to the death care
Is it?
and grief care community. Closure. No one likes closure. They do, it really offends, I think, some people in the grief care community. But I really thought about my cousin and do I have closure for her death? And yes, because I've accepted that she did die, that she's not returning, and that my relationship with her is still ongoing, but has changed. And
Mhm.
that to me is closure for me. So it doesn't mean I'm not grieving. It doesn't mean that I'm not sad about her dying.
Exactly.
But
Absolutely. Yeah. It's just, I love the word. It feels so cozy to me, comforting, you know?
yeah,
Um, so to have those two words together is really, I just think it's very special. So you
thank
picked a
you.
great name. Okay, so and what is one piece of advice you would give someone facing their own mortality or loss of a loved one?
Okay, this is going to sound crazy, guys. Are you ready for this? I would say embrace it. Really go in deep and embrace it. This could be a real gift to you. And I hate saying it. People are going to be like, my loved one died. That is not a gift. But it can be, um, it can be something that helps you grow, that, yeah, I don't even know how to explain it. It just, you have no choice.
Right.
You can't ignore it. You cannot ignore it. So embrace it, go deep into it, and journey through it. That is the only way you're coming out on the other side of it.
And there's so much, so much, I would say culturally right now. Um, I mean, just by the word like that people like to use, that triggered me. I'm
Yeah.
triggered by that or whatever. And to me, it's funny because I joke that like I'm triggered by the word triggered because for you and I, we're the same age, I think, or close, very close,
Yeah.
within a couple of years of each other, right? And we didn't have that word to fall back on. It was just life. If something happened and it was upsetting, you actually didn't have that word to just say, that triggered me, and then walk away from it. It was like, that happened to me. Now I have to deal with the repercussions of it. And so I really feel like divorce, I went through divorce. And then death is another one. As far as like, you have to go through that eye of the needle, and you just have to create, if we can create a community support or create the circumstances in which we go through this as gracefully as possible, we have all of the potential to be stronger and move forward in ways that we can't even imagine right now
Yep.
what that's
Yeah.
going to be like.
And also, I would say, I love that you mentioned grace. Give yourself grace. It is okay to be triggered because this is all so hard. It is so traumatic. It is so traumatic. And I I think we don't give ourselves enough grace, and that has more to do with our society saying, just get over it.
Mhm.
Don't feel need to get over it. Be okay talking about it. Find good peer support. There are a lot of good peer support groups out there. You are not alone. Everyone has either gone through it, is going through it, or will go through it. This is a human condition. Um,
Mhm.
so embrace it. You have no choice.
I love it. That's great. That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. And then if you could change one thing about how society approaches death and dying, what would it be?
Embrace it. No, I think that,
That's true.
yeah,
I'm
but I think also don't be afraid to talk about it. We have
Mm,
to start talking about it. I always say I'm here to help normalize this conversation around aging, death, and grief. My podcast is about aging, death, and grief, not just about death and grief, but
right.
aging too, because we don't like talking about that either in America. Talk about it, be accepting of it, force those conversations. I remember with the aging when I turned 50 and I was at work and I love being in my 50s. I'm proud of where I am. And I remember telling a director that I'm turning 50, and his reaction was, you don't say that. You don't tell anyone you're turning 50. And my reply was, no, that's their problem. I'm here to break that stereotype that being 50 and over, that we're useless, that we're not as good workers, that we're getting old. That's your
That's insane.
stereotype.
That is insane. That's not what I would ever, ever, ever say. But yes.
So don't be afraid to talk about it. We need to talk about it. We need to normalize the conversations. And that's what I really wish we would do. I wish that our television shows and our movies were more realistic also.
Okay. So that, as you were saying that and you were talking about aging, it did spur, I know it's a little bit of a sidestep, but it did remind me when my mom was still in the hospital and we weren't really sure if the caregiver situation would work out. You helped line up that day, the couple days that we went to all of the assisted living facilities. We went to like 8 or something.
Yes. It
Oh
was,
my God,
we
it was
started, I think, with 15, and then we narrowed it down because we went through what really was a priority and what was important.
right.
And then, a whirlwind.
Oh my God, it was insane. It was like, anyway, I do want to just mention that as a side note to people, that there are some really amazing assisted living facilities and there are some really crappy ones as well. So you have to do your homework. You have to also be really in touch with your own intuition around what feels right, because there is a lot of bells and whistles that are thrown at you that things are great. And we met a woman on the tour whose mom was at one of the facilities and that you ended up interviewing on your podcast, who had a horrendous number of things that happened to her mom at a variety of different assisted living facilities, that she had to pull her out of one and put her in another. And so you don't get to just put your parents away somewhere. And we need to build a community where it's not, and frankly, I don't know if our medical system will hold supporting the financing of even some of these places that have developed around that. I don't know. I just have some concerns going forward, so we're going to have to be creative and think outside the box and figure out ways to care for them. But that is about respecting the aging process. And
I agree.
And then as far as you said, the other thing that it made me think of was, and I can't remember the name of the movie or the show that's on Netflix right now. I know I know somebody in your community had to mention it to you. It's with the actor from Cheers that is
Ted
living.
Danson.
Yes.
I forget the name of it.
He's living on his own. His wife has passed and he's bored.
Oh, yeah. And he becomes like a PI. He works for
he becomes a PI in an assisted living facility.
Some of them that we met, they were like that. It
was just like that.
It was, and there are the majority of places that we visited, I remember, were so I wanted to move in, but there are some that you go to die. I hate to say that you feel like we both know
to die. We both know which one.
Yes. We won't name names here, but it was sad. The majority of them, though, there was only one that was really bad, but the majority of them were really good. If you can, sit for a meal, because food is really important to most people.
That's what we did. We ate. We had 2 lunches. One that we never wish to remember.
But it was really very eye-opening when you start to do that with your parents. And I would suggest that you start to look at these places long before you need to be in one. Just to know, for 2 reasons. And I remember talking to your father about it because your father didn't want to go visit, didn't want to have anything to do with any of these, with this plan. Um, and I said, you're doing this for two reasons. One, so you're prepared, but the more important reason is so that you know what's out there, so you're not afraid. When you know what's out there, you can make a good decision.
Yeah, exactly. And that ended up being like three that I felt really quite comfortable with. One of them, my dad's cousin moved into recently, which is hilarious. But
Nice.
I don't think it's the right fit for my parents together right now, since they can make this work for them at home, and they
Yeah.
have such a lovely place that's all on a single level and so easy. And we've sort of created a financially, it was cheaper for sure, but can they, the question, you do have to start to think about how sustainable are these things, so you have to get really realistic about a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, and a lot of times it is cheaper to stay at home, but you do need to fix the home. You do need to be sure to bring in people to help you. One of the biggest advantages to being in an assisted living facility is the community.
Yeah.
People don't realize how important community is as you get older. It is one of the factors to keeping yourself healthy. Having
Mhm.
a social life, having friends is just as important as what you eat and how you exercise. It is one of those things that people do not realize can make or break your health.
Exactly. Yeah. And we saw some very vibrant communities with people that were loving their experience.
Yeah. And
So,
that's why I think a lot of people still go to church.
mhm.
Older people go to church. It is a sense of community. I don't care where you get your community. Just get a community.
Yeah.
Find your tribe.
And for my parents, ironically, there was this, we didn't really realize that Tasha had a young child at the time. He was living in Fiji, but he got brought back to the US. And it has been this like gift to my mom and my dad, like to have this young one. He's not there all the time, but he's 3 or 4. I think he's 4 years old now, 3 or 4. And he is just a gem. He brings this vitality to the house that you don't get. So there's this intergenerational living that's going on. And we actually lived with my parents during during COVID. It was me and my and Carly and my middle son Maury, and they were in high school. So my parents are used to having intergenerational group of people in the house. So it wasn't, as much as it's hard to have people in your space, there's something really magical about creating that continuum.
Yeah, there is. And I think we've lost a lot of that intergenerational um, support. I
Yeah,
mean, we've really gone away from it with people moving out of state or even getting so busy, so too
exactly.
busy, two people working in the household.
Totally, totally. Okay, last question for you. You've been so amazing. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much for being generous with your time. I'm really grateful. I think people are going to really get a lot out of this. But what have you learned from working with people at the end of life that has influenced how you live your own life?
Being very present
Mm,
through everything, even the uncomfortable stuff, even the painful stuff, being really present because I don't know if it's going to be there tomorrow. It's also my husband and I had a great relationship beforehand. Um, we've been married now 20 years.
wow.
It is, but when I'm spending time with my husband, it used to be we would do something together and he'd be on the side. I'd be focusing on what I'm doing. He'd be there along for the ride, where now he is front and center. And whatever we're doing, we're just doing. It's okay, whatever. But really making him my focus versus we're going to do something that's my focus, and he is over here. We're doing it together. So it's being very, very present and knowing what's important. My values have completely changed since I started this work. And how it's changed really is I come from a tech background. So I was making good money. Not that I'm not making money now, because I am. I mean, I'm able to support myself with what I do. But retail therapy is not a thing for me. And I think it is for so many people when you're making lots of money. I think my values just have changed so much that the things I appreciate aren't, physical anymore. They're not, it's not about things.
Yeah. That's amazing. Your whole value system shifts when you go through really appreciating the depth that life has to offer.
Yeah.
It's like, I know one of the things that we have that I would say was a big shift, not huge. I've cooked a lot, but like that we have I have a lot of dietary restrictions that I don't consider them restrictions.
I've had lunch with you. I know.
But they make me, I feel good. Right. And that's
Yeah.
really important to me. It's a huge part, but I don't go out to eat, and we don't eat out ever. But then that's a thing. Like, we're always in the kitchen together. We're always doing those things together. We love cooking. And I mean, everyone in the family, and people heard, and you can listen if you want, but I interviewed Carly. She does her own cooking and stuff like that. And both of my kids, I'm just so grateful that everybody knows how to cook. But it also, it cuts down on the finances as far as, it's so, I can't even believe, like, sometimes I look at how much money people pay to go out as often as they do. And it's a lot. So you don't necessarily need to do those things to really have a deeply fulfilling life, is what I'm coming back to. And it's, really special. Oh my gosh, Tracy, thank you so much for being here today on the podcast. I'm so grateful.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me and for giving me your gift of time. I appreciate it.
Please, my pleasure. And we probably have more to talk about, so we may be bringing you back again. I hope that's acceptable to you.
I'd love it. I'd love to be here on again.
Awesome. Well, let's see. So I would like to leave everybody, just hang tight for just a minute for me, Tracy. Okay. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for being here and listening to this conversation I had with Tracy Arieli. Oh, wait, I totally forgot. I'm bringing you back because I want people to see how to get in touch with you. What was that?
Oh, yes. Please go to my website.
We were so distracted. So we've got a couple things. We've got Tracy's website, and then she's on YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram, all at Comforting Closure. So be sure to go to her website and check it out. I'm going to see if I can, let's see if I can do this quickly. And
if you could listen to my podcast, there's a lot of, it's very diverse. And it's called Comforting Closure Conversations with a Death Doula. And it's on all the major platforms and on YouTube.
I love that. Yeah. Let me just show people really quick, because I did have, here's the YouTube channel. So you can see if you go, and she's just got, if you click over to videos, you can see these are the ones that are her conversation about her advanced healthcare directive. There's 2 parts to it with her husband, which is just lovely. And you can see the ones that I've listened to more recently, but there's down here, you have your
meditation.
I just wanted to point, I'm wondering where that is. Maybe this
was one of the first ones, because I did not have,
anyway, I'll see if I can link it in the show notes so that people can see it. and get to it easily. But there's so many things that she's gone through, you guys. So definitely take a look at her podcast. And then I wanted to also show everybody your website. So let me just pop over there, and this is her website, and she offers, this is what I did, was their complimentary discovery call. And you can just check out the different services that she's got and see if something like what Tracy has is a good fit for you. And she can certainly refer you to other people if she's not a good fit and you're looking for something else, right?
Yep.
Is there anything in
Definitely.
particular you feel like you would like people to know about that you offer that we didn't cover?
I think we did a really good review of what I offer. I think people got a feel for me, but I'd like to say that you're never too young or healthy to start putting your advanced directive together and start having those conversations. If you do your advanced directive, it is not about filling out a piece of paper. It is really about having those conversations. And I highly recommend hiring someone to guide you through that. And, as an example, a good facilitator will take and help you find the right healthcare proxies, but then they will bring those proxies in, have that discussion, and then bring your family members in to have that discussion. It is so important to do that. So
Yeah.
you're never too young or healthy to do that. Do that now because you don't know what tomorrow will bring.
No, and the woman that that interviewed you guys, basically, that was on your podcast, but she was doing the advanced healthcare directive interview.
Yeah.
She, you know, she was saying something like she recommends people do it every year on their birthday as a
Yep.
birthday present to themselves. And I thought that was really so cool because it's a reminder of the continuum of life, right? Of
Yep.
birth and death, birth and death. And that's what I was going to actually leave people with, was really, there's one, I mean, which Tracy has said on here, but I'll say it in my own way, which is there's one thing that you are guaranteed when you come here, and that is that you're going to die. That's it. That's the only guarantee you get. So embrace, like Tracy was saying, embrace it. And let's make it a beautiful one. As much as we make a birth, we talk so much about making birth beautiful and powerful and transformative. Death can be that same thing. So, yeah.
Well, again, thank you for having me on. And everyone who's listening to this, thank you so much for taking the time and listening.
Absolutely. All right. Hang on one second, Tracy. All right, everybody. Thank you again. Now we'll finally close. Thank you so much for listening to the Yin-care podcast today. And until next time, honor yourself, celebrate your strength, and empower your transformation.